I stayed here and stood my ground, and I'm proud of myself for doing that.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
The wonderful Sinead O'Connor is my 108th Island Influencer, and she heads the Regulatory and Compliance Services team at DQ Advocates, based in the Isle of Man. Sinead is a seasoned professional in the compliance sphere, with a career spanning back to the mid-1990s. But it's not just her credentials that set Sinead apart. Born in Northern Ireland, she found her freedom and sense of belonging and home on the Isle of Man after 2 transformative summers spent on the island. Since then, Sinead has become integral to the regulatory landscape, serving as a beacon for best practices and compliance excellence. Sinead's contributions extend beyond the boardroom. With a heart for community service, she has been an active member of the Samaritans leadership team for over 12 years. When she's not navigating the complexities of compliance or leading community initiatives, you might find her enjoying a leisurely walk with her cockapoo or diving into the pages of a compelling book. I sincerely hope you find as much enjoyment in listening to this episode as I experienced in interviewing Sinead. Welcome to the Island Influencers studio to Sinead O'Connor.
Thank you.
Oh, it's so good to have you on this podcast. I've been meaning to have you on for ages now, so I'm really pleased that we finally got around to my house, and second of all, I've been really wanting to interview you, as like I said. So, for the benefit of our listeners, why don't we tell them who you are and how you've become to the Isle of Man, from where you've come from, and everything about you up to this point, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Probably can tell from the accent that I'm not from here originally. I grew up in Northern Ireland, and at the end of my first year at university, I decided with a friend that we would go away for the summer to work. We were all set to go to Jersey because my friend had been in Jersey the year before. We met some girls who'd been in the Isle of Man the year before, and they said, you should go to the Isle of Man. So we got on a boat in Belfast with no idea. Never been to the Isle of Man before. Got off.
So it must have been one of the 3 boats a year that goes.
Well, I'm trying to remember even what the boat was like. I can remember sitting outside for the majority of the journey. So I don't think it was anything swish. It was 1989, I think. Arrived into Douglas. Next day, just walked up and down the prom looking for a job. Got a job as a waitress and chambermaid in a hotel that doesn't exist anymore. But it was like the best. I just loved it. It was such a great summer. And the next year we decided to come back.
So where did you stay when... In that hotel?
In the hotel, yeah. Right. We had a room at the top of the house and we got £70 a week, which was a lot, actually, in cash. And it was so funny because I did not know about private banks or anything like that. So we banked at home with Allied Irish Bank, who had a presence on Athol Street where the blue building is. Yeah. So my first week with my £70 in my hand, I walked up to Athol Street and went in and said, can I put this in my account? To be met with horror by the people in reception to say, well, we're not that sort of bank. And I said, but I have an account at Allied Irish Bank at home in Downpatrick. And they rang Downpatrick branch and they said, is that Owen O'Connor's daughter? And, and I said, yes, that's me. So I was allowed to bring my £70 in cash and put it into the bank in Athol Street just because of who my dad was.
That's so funny.
So I did 2 summers over here and then sort of some romantic aspects of my life and decided to move over here when I finished my degree. I had 2 years left to do. Decided to move over here when I finished my degree. I think maybe subliminally there was some, this is such a nice place. It's not
quite similar to home.
It is,
I
but
guess.
in lots of ways not,
Right.
because you become very pigeonholed in Northern Ireland around things like religion and stuff like that, which isn't necessarily something I wanted to choose for my future. So I think there was lots of things about the Isle of Man that was attractive. And as I've just mentioned, my dad was chief executive of Down District Council, so he was extremely well known, and I was Owen's daughter. And I think the Isle of Man gave me an opportunity to be myself and, you know, to step outside of that and say, okay, I am who I am. And that has worked really well for me.
Yeah. Which it sure has. So, so you didn't stay as a chambermaid at all?
No, I didn't. No, when I came to the island, my dad said to me, if you don't have a job within 6 months, you have to come home. Which, you know, looking back now, I was 22, and I can only imagine saying that to my child when he was 22. but that was my dad's view. And I applied for lots of jobs. I got a job in the Old Manx Independent selling advertising space, which I absolutely hated and I was absolutely rubbish at. And thankfully, Eagle Star were recruiting. So I went to recruitment evening. They froze recruitment. So then when it came to being made redundant from Isle of Man newspapers, from Manx Independent, because Isle of Man newspapers had bought it, I wrote to Eagle Star and I basically said, hello, here I am. I came to your recruitment evening. Here I am. I'm free now. And thankfully they said, good stuff. And I joined them in 1993.
Yeah. And what did you do?
I was a new business administrator. Oh. And, you know, I loved it. And that was my first interaction with compliance, because hard disclosure was coming in the UK and you had to disclose how much commission your IFA was earning.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was the new business input on that project. And I remember someone showing me the PIA rulebook, and I fell in love at that instant and went, oh my God, this is fantastic. There's like a framework. Oh my God, I love this. I need to work in compliance.
Okay.
And so in 1995, I really wanted to get into compliance. There wasn't any openings in Eagle Star. There was a job in Sun Life. I applied for it naively, thinking I knew everything there was to know about compliance because I'd done...
Well, you'd read the PIA rulebook.
I
probably put you ahead of most people.
I knew about cancellation notices. I knew about key features documents. Therefore, I knew everything about compliance, and joined Sun Life in 1995, and it was an absolute baptism of fire. Compliance functions were barely heard of in 1995, but I had an amazing mentor who taught me a lot of what I still use today.
Sun Life was in Castletown, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we were in Bridge House originally, and then we moved up to the metropolis of Ballasalla into Global House. And within sort of 2 weeks of me starting, KPMG were appointed to come in and do a review of where we were at in terms of compliance. And I remember even thinking then, that's what I want to do. So when it came to the time that I felt I wanted to move on from Sun Life, I wrote to KPMG, there's a pattern here, and said, I'd like to come and work for you. And fortunately for me, they said yes. And 15 years I was with them.
Goodness me, I remember you there.
Yeah. So that's something that I'm really passionate about. Just create your own luck. Just go and ask. The worst they can say is no.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what was the role that did you end up carving out a role for yourself there, really, or was it?
I joined KPMG. Were quite visionary in that they had seen how important regulatory compliance was becoming. So they had started to put in place an advisory team. And I think that was in the early days of accounting firms beginning to do advisory services. So I joined the advisory team, and there was 5 of us, led by David McGarry. And David had just amazing insight into clients and how to, just really learned a huge amount from him in terms of how to, add value to clients and how to conduct yourself and quality of your report. And just amazing mentor as well. So joined as basically a consultant, and ended up, when I left, I was running the regulatory compliance advisory practice.
Goodness.
So I'm very, very chuffed to have had that experience of KPMG for 15 years.
Yeah. And while you were there, I think you became quite active on the Association of International Compliance Professionals.
Yes.
Is that right?
The Alliance of Isle of Man Compliance Professionals.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Just to make it such an easy thing to remember. Yeah, I was a director for quite a long time. I couldn't be a director when I was at KPMG because of KPMG's rules. So I only became a director when I left KPMG and went to DQ, which was 10 years ago this year.
10 years?
Yeah.
Gosh, that's flown by.
Yeah. So at the start, when I was at KPMG, I was kind of assisting with CPD. So that was my role. And I stayed as a director up until 2022 because I was organising Manx State of the Nation, and my last Manx State of the Nation was early 2022, and I was organising that whilst my husband was being treated for cancer, and I was supporting him with that, and we were away, and I just didn't have the emotional energy left anymore.
Oh, sure.
So that experience for us taught me to kind of take a long, hard look at myself and decide where was I going to put the energy that I had left. And something had to give, and that was what gave. Yeah, one of the things that gave.
well, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, throughout the time at KPMG and DQ, what sort of functions would you have undertaken? Would you have been like the poacher turn gamekeeper when you went from the insurance sector to the?
No, I don't think so, because I truly believe that you can't do regulatory compliance advisory work if you've never actually sat in the hot seat. So if you never know what it's like to be in that position in industry, then I don't think you can empathise with your clients very well. So the work that I've been fortunate enough to do is helping clients navigate their way through regulatory compliance. And that can be from anything like a bespoke query to designing frameworks, to doing training, to, FATCA CRS, data protection. It's so wide and so varied. And that's what I love about it. The fact that I never know what my day is going to look like, which is difficult for someone who loves order and rules. But I'm really lucky that people seem to have a perception that I know what I'm talking about, and so will seek my advice. And I really like helping people. I originally wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to be a nurse for years and years. And my dad said, no, I don't want you to do nursing. So I kind of think of myself as sort of a quasi nurse, is quasi helping people in there sort of navigate their way through. Compliance is not everyone's bag. It's not natural for a lot of people. I have the benefit and fortune of finding it really interesting and really easy to understand what it's seeking to achieve.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy sort of working with people to help demystify it for them and just help them out with it and sort of say, look, okay, it doesn't have to be.
No, I see. It's very valid what you said about having sat in the hot seat.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if you can help our listeners just appreciate the breadth and depth of compliance, regulatory compliance as it exists now from when it was.
I remember somebody asking me to write a churning policy. We didn't have internet in those days.
A churning policy.
And I was like, what is churning? And where do I go for churning? And
churning's illegal.
Just
note to listeners.
Just saying. Yeah. And, we didn't have the internet and stuff like that. So the one thing that I learned really early on, which I think is a good thing to share, is do a rules matrix. Do a rules matrix of every rule that you're required to comply with. That is the basis of your compliance framework. If you know what you have to comply with and you've documented that, then you can decide how often you need to test your compliance with that. And that might just be once a year or it might be quarterly. But if you know what your landscape looks like, you're onto a good thing.
Yeah, it's very sound advice.
Yeah. So I think the building blocks have to be there.
Yes. So moving to DQ, was it that same sort of function and role that you've done there?
Well, slightly different because DQ were a client of mine when I was at KPMG. That made the move quite easy because I knew them already and knew that I would like to fit in with that team. But they had also identified that they needed compliance resource themselves.
Yes.
So the proposition was, come and be our internal compliance function and effectively pay for yourself by giving compliance advice to other clients. So that was the proposition, and it's worked amazingly well. And like KPMG being visionary in the early 90s or the mid 90s, DQ were equally visionary in that, saying, well, if accounting firms can do it, why can't a law firm do it? So I was the kind of first advisory person within the law firm. And we've now grown our advisory team out into tax advisory. We've got more regulatory compliance advisory folk. So it's a really nice business model for clients as well, because
it's a real specialism for you, isn't it?
Yeah. They come with a legal problem. They can get regulatory input, or our clients come with a regulatory issue and we can say, okay, well, there's probably a legal aspect to that as well, so we can deal with that while we're here.
Which is going to be tied up to tax as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
So they're all mixed together. Proper, well, it sounds multidisciplinary.
Yes, multidisciplinary. And it's just a shame that here multidisciplinary practices don't have the same sort of focus as they do in the UK.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We did some work 2011, I brought CIFA over, Solicitors IFAs,
right,
who were a sort of trade body for those firms in the UK who had an arm of an IFA, sort of law firms and accountancy firms. And we got down a certain pathway, but the Law Society decided that they weren't going to go down the ABS. It's called ABS.
Yeah, ABS.
Yeah, they haven't gone down that. But it should be a conversation that's ongoing, surely.
Yeah. Well, it for me also, it's about growing. You cannot be a director of a law firm if you're not a lawyer. So for me, that was fine, because my career path, like, I'm 54 now, so I don't.
Youngster.
So I know what my career path looks like. But for those people who are younger and want to be on the board, there is a bit of a closed shop there. So I think ABS is, for me personally, would be something that it would be good and practical to look at.
Yes. Oh, well, we'll save that one for a little later.
Shall we skip on?
Yeah, I think we probably should. So, so you're at DQ now. So I'm curious to know how you got involved with the Samaritans and with...
right, okay, yes.
Because I know that you've been a champion for them for ages.
Yes. So when I moved to the island in 1992... I kind of knew the person that I moved to be here for. And that was it. Sort of his friendship circle. And I grew up in an environment where my family were very involved in the local community. I had experience from an early age of giving back. But I don't think I made a conscious decision to give back as such. I did make a conscious decision to widen my circle of people that I knew, to start embedding myself in the Isle of Man. And I remember thinking, right, whatever I can do, the next thing I see that I can do to do that, I will do it. And Samaritans were advertising in the paper, and I thought, I can do that. And I met a lot of resistance from people that know me to say, oh no, that's not something you should do.
It's a phenomenal thing to
I will.
To do.
So I joined Isle of Man Samaritans in 1994 when I was 24. And then when I was 26, I took time off. I had my son, and I didn't think Samaritans and a young baby were particularly compatible. So I actually was away from the branch for 13 years. And I went back in 2009. And I've been back since.
Yeah.
And it is just one of the best things that I do outside of work. In terms of what I was saying before, picking where I wanted to put my emotional energy, work, family and Samaritans were the three things that I decided were worthy of my emotional energy after Mike's cancer crisis. So that's, it's still a great passion of mine. And I can't see myself ever not doing it. I'm looking forward to rotating off the branch leadership team. By the time I come off in 2025, I'll have been on the branch leadership team for 12 years.
Gosh, that's a stint.
Which is in addition to listening commitments and other commitments in the branch. So what
sort of listening commitment do you do?
The minimum is 3 is one shift a week, and that shift is 3 hours. So it's not massive. And we have a real variety of shifts that's available for someone who's working full time. And then 70 minutes per quarter we have to do between the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. So I was on shift on Sunday morning from 5 a.m. till 8. So if you do sort of 2 of those every quarter, you kind of hit your target. But it's not like working for a corporate where you sort of have big targets to meet, and it's not call centre at all. Like, we have no, you've now been on this call for 20 minutes and you need to move them on because there's that many people waiting or whatever. Everybody is treated individually in their own right and listened to for as long as they need to.
And what sort of volume of calls that you get on average, can you say?
Yeah, Samaritans gets 1 call every 10 seconds. So that's a known statistic. A really good statistic, to kind of put it into context, is every second of 2022, there was a Samaritan volunteer on the phone every second. So the demand is constant.
And this is, so the Isle of Man Samaritans, that's just for Isle of Man?
No, it's not.
So it's a UK.
Yeah.
Right.
When I joined in 1994, we were an Isle of Man branch for just Isle of Man callers.
It's too small and too personal, I suppose.
Yeah, towards the end of my time in the 90s, we had become part of a daisy chain for the Northwest. So if you phoned Liverpool and they were engaged, you would trip through to Manchester and you trip through to us ultimately. The daisy chain model meant that sometimes people would reach the end of the daisy chain and fall off the end. So no one would pick up their call. So I don't know the date, but Vodafone entered into a partnership with Samaritans to underwrite a free call number. And because of that, if you call the number from the Isle of Man, your call just gets routed to a central distribution point and it gets put through to whichever volunteer becomes available next.
That's a really good
So it's important.
Done, isn't it? And how long's the average wait?
It depends. Sometimes it can be nothing. You'll get straight through. Sometimes in the middle of the night, unfortunately, it can be up to 20 minutes that people are waiting to get through. So Sunday morning when I started at 5, the wait time was about 3 minutes. There was about 14 callers waiting. By the end of the shift, there was no callers waiting. And the wait time was down to 0. So it just depends on volume of volunteers, volume of calls, length of calls, because we don't have a time bar. So it's not like you get 30 minutes. It's like you get as long as you need. So calls can be an hour and a half, 10 minutes. It's really what the caller needs. I mean, we are trained to manage our calls, but some of the other resources that people have give you a definitive amount of time. And once your time's up, your time's up. But Samaritans don't do that.
No, and if any of our listeners wanted to get involved and volunteer and become, how would they go about that?
So it's all sort of online these days.
We can put some links in the show notes if you would let us have them. Yeah.
You go to the Samaritans website, you read all about volunteering. Once you've read all of that and decided this is still something you want to do, there's an Inquire Now button, and that then takes you through to booking an interview with Isle of Man Samaritans, and that's all sort of scheduled in with our training intake. So our next training intake is in May.
Right.
And we do 3 intakes a year. So,
okay, that's useful information to have. Thanks very much. And I mean, hats off for doing that service.
Thank you.
It's amazing. So I can see that you've, done a lot of stuff actually. You've done a lot. I'm scrolling through Sinead's LinkedIn profile because that's obviously the best method for stalking people when you want to interview them. So.
And I'm a LinkedIn fan, as you might have noticed.
Yeah. Well, I did notice you did a video recently, which I saw.
Yes.
But on workplace well-being.
Yes.
So I wonder if you'd mind just telling me about it. And
yeah, that was at the kind invitation of Impact Professional Solutions, who asked me to come and talk to them about various things to do with compliance. But again, because of the involvement with Samaritans, we just had a chat about sort of well-being and personal well-being. And I've always been very open about the fact that I've, had a number of breakdowns myself. and the support that I've had, particularly in the early days at KPMG, can't fault it. And I think the more people who can speak about their own personal experiences and make it quite normal for other people to say, yeah, I'm struggling, or I have struggled, the better. So that was my rationale for kind of taking part in that piece, because being open and honest is really important, I think.
Indeed. Well, it's worth watching. Anybody listening that wants to have a look on your LinkedIn. Okay, so if you don't mind me asking, moving on to the what I normally, inflict people with. What was? I know you were very impressed with getting 70 quid a week when you come here. You came over here for an honest day's graft, I'm sure. But what's your earliest memory of money?
Oh, my earliest memory of money is I used to get 10p a week pocket money.
So much back then.
I know. And I had a yellow Teddy money box. So the 10p a week went into the Teddy money box under strict supervision from my dad. And the money box was sellotaped at the bottom. And it was difficult because where we live at home, and my parents are still alive, I'm very lucky, but my parents' house is next door to my dad's parents. So we lived next door to my granddad and granny, and my dad's brother and his wife lived on the other side. Now, on the end of my granddad's house was my granddad's little shop. So I have a lovely thing in my office of a piece that was written in the paper about my granddad and his shop. But the fact that I had to save my pocket money rather than taking my 10p up to my granddad's shop, which was sort of a stone's throw from the house, to spend it on sweets or whatever. Yeah. But I was taught the value of saving. And once the money box was full, the money box got sent into the bank. And I never got to spend my pocket money. But at 18, when I started university, my dad handed me a bank book, as you had in those days. Yeah. And in that bank book was £700, which was all of the pocket money and my first communion money and my confirmation money and all the money that had been saved up over the years.
Yes.
But I also remember my auntie giving me a postal order for £5.
I remember those.
Yes. And my dad taking it into the bank. And then I remember banks being places where, a bit like church, where you didn't speak, it was really quiet. And we went into the bank and I was saying to Dad, do they still have my postal order? And he was explaining to me that no, the bank sort of take your £5 and then they use it and they know they owe you £5. And I was disgusted with the fact that no one had ring fenced my £5 postal order.
Quite right.
Yeah. So those are my very early memories of money, taught at a very early age about the benefit of saving.
Yes. Good old Dad.
Good old Dad. As you can hear, he's played a large part in my life, a very big influence.
Yes, money, career.
Yes.
Wonderful. So, you don't have to answer this one. I just throw it in there. But define what being rich or wealthy means to you.
Yeah, this is one of the questions I have thought about, because for me, it is about being generous with your time and your resources and your money. And I grew up around that too. I always saw a lot of generosity on all of those fronts, from my parents, from my grandparents. So that's what I grew up with. And I'm very fortunate to be very comfortable. And so that for me is, right, okay, what can you share with others, whether it's your time, whether it's your money, whether it's other resources. I think that's hugely important. I don't like greed and I don't like selfishness. And some of the time I find the wealth that some people have rather obscene when they don't then share it with others. And I'm like, right, what good that money could do in the world. I'm sure you don't need it all, but yes. That's my personal view.
No, that's a good answer. Yeah. It's a good answer. Thank you. But of all the things you've done so far in your life, what's given you the most fulfillment?
Wow. My son, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Him and I faced some tough times together. And I was a single parent for a while, which was wholly unexpected and very difficult coming from Catholic Ireland. And so him and I are particularly close, and I think we're our own success story, because it would have been so easy to run home to Ireland then, and I didn't do that. I stayed here and stood my ground, and I'm proud of myself for doing that, and I'm proud of him for he's faced his own challenges, particularly in his teenage years, and he's overcome those, and I'm so proud of him for that. Really, really proud of him. And again, when life was difficult for him, he could have come scurrying back to the Isle of Man and traded on my contacts and got himself a job. And he didn't. He stood his ground in London, and he's now doing extremely well for himself. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can say what he's going to do if you want.
Well, I probably would have to shoot you. So he tells me.
That's okay. Yes. I don't know what I am. Okay, so for any aspiring business owner, organisation leader, entrepreneur, what would be your number one tip?
Wow, gosh, what would be my number one tip? Communication. That's the thing that I think is really, really important. Treating people with respect through communicating with them properly and in time. I really don't like people finding out stuff that I should have told them first. So communicating with people and treating people well would be the thing that if I ran my own firm, and I sort of have a lot of autonomy at DQ, but I like to think that one of the things I am good at is communication. Yeah, that's really important.
I saw an interesting quote: "Words are weapons." It's,
yeah. Even to the extent of, I met somebody for lunch today, and we were talking about how just the way somebody phrases something can be heard in so many different ways, and can sometimes come across in a way that you didn't intend it to. So I'm very passionate about being kind. I'm sure there are people who have worked in my teams. They're like, really? Because when I left KPMG, they gave me a lovely journal in which everybody had written their memories, and a lot of people commented on my laugh. But one of the other things that got a lot of comment was my red pen. So I channel my inner David McGarry quite a lot when it comes to
Barclays used a green pen on mine.
Yes, apparently that's a little bit nicer, but I was very much a red pen girl. And I have very high standards when it comes to communication and the written word, and I think some of the people who have worked in my teams have probably felt the sharp end of my red pen.
That's fascinating. So if you could go back and give yourself your 18-year-old self some advice, what would you tell her?
Do you know what? I don't think I would tell her anything. I think I would let her let her make her own path, because the path has been pretty rough at times, but the 54-year-old me stands on the shoulders of all the me that there've been before. So I've learnt from my experiences, and I think going back and sort of saying, oh, don't do this or possibly do that or whatever. No, I'm proud of who she was, because she made a decision.
She did.
To come away from what was safe and known, and what would my life have looked like if I stayed in Northern Ireland and just again used my dad's contacts and etc. Yes, of course I have a part of me that thinks but then I would have been spending time around my parents, and they're in their 80s now or whatever. But I'm proud of how I've stood on my own 2 feet. I went to boarding school at 11. That was my choice. So I've been standing on my own 2 feet since I was 11.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty singular. I'm very singular. Yeah. Probably too much sometimes.
That's a wonderful answer. Great. Thank you. Thank you. And what do you do to relax and keep your life in balance?
Well, I would say Samaritans, number one thing. I became the proud mummy of a dog last January. A dog that I didn't necessarily want, but I wasn't.
How do you get a dog you didn't want?
Well, I wasn't sort of thinking, oh, I'd love a dog. But my husband sort of said, oh, we should get a dog, blah, blah, blah. And then we ended up in Coffee Cottage one day. There was somebody with a cockapoo puppy. The next thing we're on a list. The next thing Mrs. Dillon is phoning me and saying, we've got your puppy ready. And I was like, oh my God. She is one of the best things I've ever done. She's amazing. She's so great.
Makes you wonderfully adventurous going out on car journeys.
Yeah. Yes. Least said about that, the better. But yeah, that has been an amazing thing to do. Like having to get out with her and walk, and very blessed to live so close to the Heritage Trail and just
it's
walk
wonderful,
that.
Isn't it?
And yeah, it's
try not to mow you down on my mountain bike.
Yeah, it's been so good. Yeah, so that is walking, her, reading. I'm a passionate reader, and Samaritans are the things I do to relax. Yes.
And what's your favourite trip you've ever taken?
Oof. Probably my honeymoon with Mike. Mike and I met when he worked for the Financial Supervision Commission, which is a compliance love story in itself, but it's got nothing to do with compliance. He will say I stalked him into Bar George, and that's probably true, but we don't have time for that today. But when I met him, he was at the FSC and he was sent to Bâle for a course, and he rang me from Bâle and said, Switzerland is beautiful. I will bring you here on honeymoon. 3 weeks. Presumptuous young man. So when we did get married, we did go to Switzerland on honeymoon, and it was gorgeous. And yeah, I hold that trip particularly dear.
Would you like to go back one day?
No, Mike and I have this thing where if we've had a trip to a place which has been so special, we leave it. Like we had a brilliant trip to Paris once, which he bought me for Christmas, and he wrote me a letter in French to tell me he's going to kill me for telling me this. Why were you talking about me? But he wrote me a letter in French because my degree is in French. Yes. And it was all about this trip to Paris, and we had such a lovely, lovely time. So we have this thing where we don't go back to places that we've been before that are particularly special in case we ruin the memory.
That's pretty lovely,
yeah.
actually. Yeah. Yes. What would you... so tell me, what's the best things that you say then are about living in the Isle of Man? What's your...
Freedom. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't matter where you went to school. It doesn't matter what your name is. Like nobody pigeonholes you from the minute they meet you, which unfortunately is still a facet at home.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I've been a few times. I love Northern Ireland, and it's so difficult to believe about the place.
Yeah. It's a very odd thing that we feel the need to immediately identify what side of the divide you're on. So the island offers me freedom, but it also offers me a place where I am who I am. I'm Sinead O'Connor. I'm not Owen O'Connor's daughter. Not that I have any issue with being that, but I am who I am, and I have made my life here and made a success of my life here, and I'm very proud of that. Yeah, and it's offered me the freedom to do that. And I love the small community. My sister lives in Edinburgh, and prior to that she lived in London, and she cannot abide, she's like, how do you cope with people?
My sister's the exact same. She lives in Denver.
Yeah, she's like, how do you cope with seeing people like that in the street? But I love that, because that's the type of community I'm from at home. So that I find very comforting. And like my dad is someone that lots of people know, and I always aspired to be that. I always aspired to be similar to him, and I think that's a good thing too. Yeah.
So what are the main challenges that the Isle of Man faces, would you say?
I think I feel there is a real reluctance amongst some aspects of the community to diversify. I love seeing diverse cultures coming into our island and bringing all of their experience and all of their values, and I feel really sad when I see people commenting on foreigners and all that kind of stuff, and I'm like, no, come on, most of us are foreigners here.
sure are. It's, I suppose it's no different to the debate in the US right now with the partisans and the immigration issue there. Hello.
Yeah. And I think the island is still a really safe place. I think it's got controls in place to deal with people that it doesn't necessarily feel it wants to have here. But the diversification thing, I think, let's embrace it. Let's learn from all these people from other different places in the world. This is great. And it saddens me that not everybody shares that view. Do I get upset about things like transport links? Not really. I chose to live here. So, if I want great transport links, I can relocate. But I don't. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm home. 5 minutes, I'm on the Heritage Trail. What is not to love about that? It's safe, it's secure. There's so much I like about it.
It sure is. And what opportunities can you see ahead? When we touched briefly on the Law Society. Mm-hmm. Needs to look at ABS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Ooh, good question. I always like to think, our regulatory framework is really strong. I think we could sell that as some concept of,
I couldn't agree more.
Centre of excellence kind of thing. We've got so much skill. Like, let's take that skill to places that could benefit from it. Let's do teaching. I had the benefit of going to Turks and Caicos and running a day's seminar for Emma Rose. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, like little Sinead from Ballynoe standing up beside the Turkish or the Turks and Caicos First Minister, oh my God, if you only knew who I really am. But
he's probably thinking the same thing. It's his film star or his pop star right next to me.
It's Irish pop star. But we have all that knowledge. We have the knowledge of a strong regulatory framework. We have our experience to sell and share. So why don't we do some more of that? Helping those jurisdictions that aren't necessarily in the same place as us.
Be a great thing to export.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. So what have you got planned next, Sinead? What's next on the plans for you?
Well,
you haven't been headhunted by another great
No.
film,
I'm very much staying put at DQ. I have 6 years to run to retirement, hopefully, if God spares me, as we say in Ireland. So the plan is that when I get to 60, yes, I will retire. We've already started succession planning for that at work, which is good.
What will you retire to?
I would really like to get into, I'd really like to dip my toe in the water of non-executive directors, I think. But there are lots of things that, lots of statutory boards that I would be interested, like the Mental Health Commission, for example. I'd be really interested in being part of that. So I think that's where I see myself in the future, is hopefully bringing that valuable experience to boards, to statutory boards. That I don't see myself hanging up my boots, and I don't think that would be me.
No, having some purpose is
and
paramount.
Again, example, my dad was chair of the board of governors of a high school, a primary school, the local business centre, and kept that up for many, many years. My granddad, his dad, was acting up until he was in his mid-80s. So I haven't got example of parents and grandparents sort of going, okay, right now I just sit here and wait.
I'm glad you said that.
So yeah, I very much got lots of plans and doing loads of things like there's walking groups and they only ever meet on a Friday, and I'm like, I want to do that. So yeah, things like that I'm really looking for, and I really pray for my health. Mike's health scare has sort of made me really aware that you can't take that for granted.
No, you cannot.
And you might have plans and then life comes along and picks you up and puts you on a separate set of reels. So I'm really hopeful that I'll get the opportunity to do all the things I want to do. But
I do pray that you do, and I'm sure they'll be lining up for you. Somebody of your experience.
If life sets me on a different set of reels, then I have a firm belief that your path is already carved out for you. You just have to walk it.
Yeah. So, as I know you're an avid reader, what books would you recommend to our listeners?
yeah, this is where I struggle to think of one in particular. But there is a really good book, which is written by Katie Columbus, and it's about how to listen. And she was a Samaritan volunteer, and it's a great book. I think more people need to learn how to listen. Lots of people think they know how to listen, but actually active listening is a real skill. I'm a member of the Radio Times book club. And I've really enjoyed that because they send you such an eclectic mix of books, to the extent that I can never remember what I've read from 1 month to the next. But at the minute, I'm reading a book that is set in space. It's never a book that I would choose to read myself, but I'm really, really enjoying it. And yeah, so if I had to think of one, I also really enjoyed The Long Road to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. Particularly enjoyed that one. So that probably sticks in my head as one to it. But How to Listen by Katie Columbus.
Yeah, we could put those references in the show notes. Yeah, for anyone that wants to look them up. And any podcasts?
No, I'm not a podcast girl, funnily enough.
Up till now.
But I've tried it a few times. I don't think I get the time really.
I find it. I'm sort of the opposite direction to you to the office. I just have them on in the car there and back. It's 10 minutes at a time.
Yeah, I'm a local radio fan, so I have local radio on in the car. But I have tried to find a place in my life where a podcast might fit in, but
dog walking's not the time either.
No, because I want to be there for her, and I chat to her as I'm walking along, bizarrely. But the one time I've thought about, I love ironing, and I have, bizarre. But I thought about, podcasts and ironing, that's quite a good combination.
Safer than watching the telly, you're going to burn yourself.
This is the thing, you see, I'm also have a guilty passion for QVC fashion. So I watch QVC fashion while I'm ironing.
Okay, well, that's a different podcast link to go on.
So yeah, podcasts haven't trumped QVC fashion just yet.
And I'll throw in, have you got some movies to recommend? Are you a movie fan?
No, I watched One Life recently at the cinema, which was the story of the guy that saved loads of children during the Holocaust, which was really good. There is a film that sticks in my memory, and I went to see it when I was at university in France, and it was a German film with French subtitles, and I think it was called Eureka. It was a bit like The Boy in Striped Pajamas, but it was so powerful that it sticks in my head as being a film that I really enjoyed watching. But yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of a sort of rom-com-y type, brain deady type. I'd like to watch Oppenheimer, but it's a 3-hour investment.
And at least 2 sittings.
And I'm useless at night.
Yeah.
I'm like,
no, I am too. Yeah.
Go past 10 o'clock, and I'm like, can I please go to bed?
Better have mine. Favourite quote?
Favourite quote is definitely one of my own, which is create your own luck.
Yeah.
I truly believe in it. I really do. And I've said it to my son. I say it to anybody who'll listen, create your own luck. Just go and ask.
Yeah.
The worst they can say is no.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And for our listeners who want to go and find more about you, LinkedIn, we've mentioned.
Yes.
Where else on the LinkedIn, the DQ website?
DQ website,
okay.
Yes. I work under my maiden name of O'Connor for various reasons. So that's where you will find my work profile. If you're lucky enough to know me in my personal life, then you know what my married name is. And you can come and find me on things like Facebook.
Indeed. Lovely. Well,
okay,
thank you very much, Sinead.
You're welcome.
It's been a joy interviewing you today.
It's been lovely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening this far. I hope you found this episode to be valuable. If so, I'd like to ask you for a small favour. Would you please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review, because that's one of the best ways for others to find the series, and please send a link to the podcast to 3 friends or colleagues who know they'll find it helpful. That way we can spread the word about how great a place the Isle of Man is to live and work, and help spread some positivity. Thanks again for tuning in and being part of our great community. I'll see you next time. Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer Catherine Watts from Social Cues and editor Martin Bamford at Bear Content, and thank you for listening.